The blue ice glows with trapped light. 30 meters below the surface of a calving iceberg off the coast of Greenland, the silhouette emerges through layers of frozen crystal. Twin engines, high wings, a tail section still bearing the White Star insignia of the United States Army Air Forces. The aircraft sits level, as if it simply landed and never moved again, swallowed whole by snow that became ice that became this drifting tomb. The fuselage stretches nearly 20 meters, nose to tail. Paint remains visible through the ice, olive drab on the upper surfaces, neutral gray beneath. No fire damage, no impact craters. The propeller blades are bent slightly backward, consistent with emergency landing rotation, but the airframe itself shows no catastrophic structural failure. This is not a crash site. This is a parking position that lasted 80 years. The exploration team approaches from the western face of the berg, where recent calving exposed a vertical ice wall. Radar imaging detected the metal anomaly 3 weeks prior during routine iceberg tracking, but nothing prepared the crew for what the cameras reveal now. The left wing extends outward at a shallow angle, its leading edge sharp and intact. Rivets march in perfect lines along aluminum panels. The navigation light housing sits undamaged at the wingtip. Closer inspection identifies the aircraft as a Douglas C-47 Skytrain, the military transport variant of the legendary DC-3. More than 10,000 of these aircraft served during the war, ferrying troops, supplies, and wounded across every theater of combat. This one carries markings from the North Atlantic Wing, a designation used for supply runs between Greenland, Iceland, and the British Isles during the critical years of 1942 through 1945. The tail number remains legible through the ice, stenciled in black paint just below the horizontal stabilizer. Serial records will later match it to an aircraft reported missing in March 1944 during a supply flight from Narsarsuaq Air Base to Reykjavik. The crew filed a distress call, reporting engine trouble and severe icing conditions before radio contact ceased. Search aircraft found nothing. The official record listed the plane and its 4 crew members as lost over the Greenland ice cap. What the search teams could not know was that the C-47 had made it down intact. The pilot likely found a flat section of snowfield during a storm, brought the aircraft to a controlled landing, and came to rest on what appeared to be solid ground. Within hours, blowing snow would have begun covering the fuselage. Within days, the aircraft would have been invisible from the air. Within months, fresh snowfall compacted into ice, sealing the plane in a frozen shell that grew thicker each winter. The camera moves forward along the fuselage until it reaches the cockpit windows. Ice distorts the view slightly, but the interior remains clear enough to document in extraordinary detail. Both pilot seats face forward, shoulder harnesses still draped across the backrests. The control yokes sit in neutral position. Throttle levers are pulled back to idle, exactly where they would be after engine shutdown. The instrument panel holds dozens of gauges, each one readable through the ice. Altimeter, airspeed indicator, artificial horizon, engine temperature and fuel pressure dials for both Wright Cyclone radial engines. The radio equipment occupies the center console, tuning dials, frequency selectors, headphone jacks. Everything sits ready for use, as if the crew might return at any moment and resume their flight. On the co-pilot's side, a clipboard rests against the side window. The papers appear to be navigation charts, though specific markings are impossible to read through both ice and decades of cold-induced brittleness. A thermos lies wedged between the seats. The oxygen system hoses dangle from their ceiling mounts, regulators attached. What strikes the exploration team most is the absence of panic. No scattered equipment, no broken instruments. The cockpit configuration suggests the crew shut down the aircraft properly. secured their stations, and prepared for either rescue or a long wait. Survival protocol for downed aircrew in Greenland emphasized staying with the aircraft. The fuselage offered shelter, and search teams would look for the plane's outline from above. Moving away from a crashed aircraft in Arctic conditions meant almost certain death. The crew likely survived the landing without injury. They would have activated the emergency locator beacon, rationed their supplies, and waited for weather to clear. But March storms in Greenland can last for days. Snow accumulation can bury structures in hours. If the aircraft became covered before search, planes could fly. The crew faced a grim calculus: stay and freeze, or leave and freeze. Glacial ice forms through a process called firn compaction. Fresh snow falls. Its own weight compresses lower layers. Air pockets shrink. Crystals merge. Over time, snow becomes granular ice called firn, which eventually compresses into solid glacial ice. The process takes years, but in regions of heavy snowfall, like the Greenland ice cap, burial can happen within a single season. The C-47 landed during one of the worst storm systems recorded in 1944. Meteorological records from the era show sustained blizzard conditions across southern Greenland for nearly 2 weeks in March. Snow accumulation rates reached 3 meters in some areas. An aircraft on the ground would vanish beneath that volume of snow before any thaw could begin. As ice formed around the plane, temperature became the critical preservation factor. At 30 meters depth within an iceberg, temperatures remain constant at approximately -15 degrees Celsius year-round. No liquid water exists. No oxygen circulates. Bacterial activity halts completely. The ice creates a sterile, airless environment more effective than any museum storage vault. Unlike shipwrecks on the ocean floor, which face constant salt corrosion and biological activity, or aircraft crashes in temperate zones where moisture and oxidation destroy metal over decades, this C-47 entered a state of arrested time. The aluminum alloy skin shows no rust. The rubber seals around windows remain flexible. Even the fabric control cables inside the wings maintain structural integrity. The cold preserved everything, down to the paint on instrument faces and the ink on paper documents. The iceberg itself formed thousands of years ago as part of the Greenland ice sheet. The aircraft landed on what appeared to be flat ground, but was actually the surface of a slow-moving glacier. Over 80 years, that ice flowed toward the coast at roughly 100 meters per year. The plane traveled with it, buried deep within the ice mass, until the glacier reached the ocean and began to calve. The berg that now holds the C-47 broke away from the main ice sheet approximately 2 years ago and has been drifting south ever since. The aft section of the fuselage contains the cargo bay, and here the ice offers glimpses of what the aircraft carried on its final flight. Metal supply crates sit stacked along the port side, still secured with canvas straps. The crates bear stenciled markings indicating medical supplies, sulfa drugs, plasma, bandages, standard cargo for supply runs supporting field hospitals in Iceland and England. Near the starboard emergency exit, a duffel bag lies against the bulkhead. Personal gear, likely belonging to one of the crew. The canvas shows no deterioration. Through a gap in the ice, part of a wool jacket is visible, its dark fabric still intact. Next to it, what appears to be a leather flight manual case rests on its side. The cargo also includes mail sacks. During the war, C-47s frequently carried mail alongside supplies, maintaining communication between military personnel stationed across the Atlantic. Several canvas bags marked with Postal Service tags sit wedged between crates. Letters inside those bags, written 80 years ago, remain sealed and undelivered, preserved in ice along with everything else. The radio operator's station occupies the forward section of the cargo bay. The equipment rack holds a command radio set, its tubes and wiring visible through the chassis. Headphones hang from a hook. A logbook sits on the small desk surface. The last entry, though frozen in place, likely documents the distress call, time, position, nature of the emergency. That information will prove critical for understanding the final minutes of the flight. One detail catches the team's attention. A parachute pack lies near the rear cargo door, still folded and secured. Emergency protocol required crew to don parachutes before attempting bailout, yet this one remains unused. Combined with the organized state of the cockpit, the evidence suggests the crew never considered abandoning the aircraft. They committed to the emergency landing and saw it through. Cross-referencing the tail number with military archives reveals the aircraft's operational history. The C-47 entered service in October 1943, assigned to the Air Transport Command's North Atlantic Wing. For 5 months, it flew the Greenland, Iceland, Scotland route, part of the critical supply chain supporting Allied operations in Europe. The plane logged over 300 flight hours without incident before its final mission. On March 12, 1944, the aircraft departed Narsarsuaq, then known as Bluey West 1, carrying medical supplies, mail, and a small amount of high-priority radio equipment destined for Reykjavik. The crew consisted of 4 men: Captain Robert Marsh, pilot, 26 years old, from Pennsylvania; First Lieutenant James Keller, co-pilot, 23, from Ohio; Technical Sergeant Howard Mills, flight engineer, 29, from Texas; Staff Sergeant Carl Whitman, radio operator, 22, from Montana. All experienced in Arctic flying conditions. Weather briefings that morning warned of an approaching storm system, but conditions at departure appeared manageable. The flight plan called for a direct route across the Denmark Strait, approximately 800 kilometers over open water and ice. Estimated flight time, 3 hours. The aircraft carried fuel for 5 hours plus reserves. 2 hours into the flight, Captain Marsh radioed Narsarsuaq reporting severe icing on the wings and both engines running rough. He requested clearance to descend and return to base. The transmission broke up. Narsarsuaq requested him to repeat. The next transmission came through clearly. Losing power both engines, attempting emergency landing on ice cap. Position approximately. The signal cut to static. Search aircraft launched the following day when weather permitted, but visibility remained poor. They flew grid patterns over the estimated position for a week. Nothing appeared on the snow. The official search ended March 25, 1944. The crew was declared missing, presumed killed in action. Families received telegrams. The aircraft was written off as a total loss. The file was closed. What happened in those final minutes can now be reconstructed from the aircraft's condition. The captain descended through the storm until he broke through the cloud base and saw snow below. He aimed for what appeared to be flat terrain. The co-pilot called out altitude. The engineer prepared for impact. The radio operator sent the final position update. The aircraft touched down hard but level. The landing gear, not designed for snow, collapsed immediately, but the fuselage skidded to a stop intact. The crew shut down engines, secured their stations, and activated the emergency beacon. Then they waited. The storm raged outside. Snow accumulated. Hours turned to days. At some point, the crew made a decision. Perhaps they attempted to walk out. Perhaps they remained with the aircraft and succumbed to cold. The ice holds the plane, but not the answer to what happened to the men who flew it. Glacial preservation surpasses every other natural environment for maintaining structural integrity over long time spans. Ocean wrecks face constant salt corrosion, pressure damage, and biological activity. Desert crash sites endure sandblasting and extreme temperature fluctuations. Mountain wrecks suffer freeze-thaw cycles that crack metal and disintegrate materials. Ice does none of this. Ice simply holds. The C-47 inside this iceberg exists in a state that defies normal decay. If recovered and thawed carefully, many components would likely still function. The engines could be turned by hand. The instruments could be calibrated. The radio could receive power. The airframe could undergo structural testing. No other preservation method, not burial, not museum storage, not artificial freezing, can match what the Greenland ice cap achieved by accident. This discovery also reveals something about the nature of historical record. 4 men vanished 80 years ago. Their families mourned. The military moved on. The war continued. The loss became a footnote in thousands of pages of casualty reports. But the aircraft never disappeared. It simply waited, moving slowly through ice, traveling south at glacial pace toward the ocean where it would eventually be found. Other aircraft lie buried in Greenland's ice. At least 50 planes went down during the war years. Some were found and recovered in the decades since. Others remain lost. Each one represents a crew, a mission, a moment when weather or mechanical failure or simple chance turned a routine flight into a disaster. The ice remembers them all. The C-47 will drift with its iceberg until either the berg melts completely or breaks apart in warmer waters. Recovery operations are under discussion, but extracting a 20-ton aircraft from the center of an unstable ice mass presents enormous challenges. For now, the plane remains where it landed, frozen in March 1944, a perfectly preserved witness to a war fought across ice and ocean, a reminder that some stories survive not in archives or memory, but in the cold patience of water that refused to let go.